Now for some frequently asked questions. Why do insurance companies want peaceful and orderly processes like arbitration courts? Why don't they say, if you join us, we will enforce everything by force? Because violence is not only expensive, it is economic suicide. Companies that threaten to use force lose customers, create risks, and destroy trust. Companies that solve conflicts peacefully win clients and make profits. That is why markets push toward peace, not violence. Profit becomes a driver for peaceful cooperation. And this idea is so important for the IOboxPlanet that I will now describe it with dramatic terms and illustrations. Why does profit reduce violence? As mentioned, because violence is not only expensive, it is economic suicide. If a problem can be solved without violence, peaceful solutions and peaceful companies are much cheaper. Violent competitors price themselves out of the market. Let's do a thought experiment. Violence requires weapons and trained people, and which companies and organizations have weapons and know how to use them? Of securities companies, of course, but imagine this. The rumor starts spreading that a security company plans to threaten clients and other companies. First, it would immediately lose customers. No reasonable person will pay for protection from someone who might become a threat. But there is more. Other security companies will quickly organize resistance because most of them are connected through business relationships like reinsurance agreements. But of course, this does not mean that attempts at organized violence are impossible. If, for example, a psychopathic billionaire decides to waste his money on destruction, he can cause harm. But psychopathic billionaires could do that on Earth, and this cannot be prevented in any system. Fortunately, if we look at reality on Earth, there are far fewer such cases than there are in all of the James Bond movies. Still, and once again, as a profit-oriented sustainable business venture, there is no violence, no mafia, no organized crime, neither in the security industry nor anywhere else. Sum it up. Why does peace dominate on the IOboxPlanet? As we've just illustrated, if a problem can be solved without violence, peaceful providers are simply much cheaper. As we've just seen, even conflicts can be resolved without violence. And since all other human interactions by definition are already peaceful, we can conclude that peace prevails everywhere on the IOboxPlanet. So what is the key difference compared to Earth? When the state uses violence, it can simply shift the costs onto taxpayers through its monopoly on force. It can even force its citizens to fight and to die for it, and state wars have cost dozens of millions of lives in the last century alone. And even if a state loses a war, a new regime replaces the old one, and in the end little changes. No matter how high the costs, no matter how large the deficit, the state with its monopoly on power continues to exist. On the IOboxPlanet, on the other hand, there is no state and no monopoly on the use of force. Couldn't security companies join forces and establish regional dictatorships? And wouldn't the monopoly of security providers be the most dangerous monopoly of all? That's a funny argument because that's what we have today. States are nothing more than huge, all-powerful security monopolies. On the IOboxPlanet, things are different. Anyone can start a company, and sometimes even a monopoly situation may emerge, but only as long as the monopoly is truly better or cheaper than the others. But no company is the best everywhere and forever. A successful newcomer may grow and become large. But large companies tend to become bureaucratic and slow, and new ideas and competitors are constantly emerging. Some are cheaper, some are cooler, some are simply different, and because people have different and always changing needs, the market stays dynamic and diverse. What about violence? Couldn't the company create a monopoly through force? Now, even if we try to imagine such a scenario, it quickly becomes clear how unrealistic it is. A company would have to buy weapons and hire mercenaries, and then what? Occupy another company's headquarters? Threaten their customers? The result would be immediate. They would face the entire peaceful security industry at once, if they could even find enough people willing to join such a suicidal mission. And for what? What could they gain? So, in the end, competition on the IOboxPlanet remains not only open but also peaceful. Very last point before we get into the summary and the bonus chapters. What about the military, foreign policy and wars? In short, the military protects today's states. And that means logically, without a state, there is no military. And that's why this question does not arise on the IOboxPlanet. But of course, this question does arise when we ask ourselves how we get from here to there, when we are moving toward a stateless world. Why? Because there will likely be a period where stateless areas exist next to states. And then the key question is, how can areas without a military protect themselves against threats or attacks from states with armies? The answer, it is not only possible, it's also very interesting. This takes us away from our focus on the IOboxPlanet. Still, here is a small preview of some ideas. Let's imagine Switzerland in the middle of Europe after it got rid of all state monopolies. Interestingly enough, my friend David Dürr describes just how this could happen in his great little book 2048, so far available in German only. So the question is, what could defense look like in such a system? 1. Self-defense and militia. Free people are free to own firearms and would have an incentive to learn how to use them for self-defense. Many people might join local defense groups. As a matter of fact, militia already has a long tradition in Switzerland. All within the rules of the peace pass system, of course. Switzerland, Vietnam, Afghanistan and others have already shown a population that can defend itself is very hard to control or invade. 2. Efficiency and technology. Private security groups would be faster, more flexible and more innovative than any military will ever be. Now I can attest to that from my personal military experience. 3. Smart deterrence, guerrilla warfare and not aggression. Private organizations would have innovative ideas for preventing, even the planning of attacks by foreign state and military leaders. Security firms could make it clear that such ambition, such planning and expeditions would put the lives of the responsible planners and their personal surroundings in direct danger. Remember, the core principle is, of course, defense and deterrence and never attack. And as mentioned, these are just first ideas to explore how such a system could work. And here is your second word for the Hope Unplugged challenge. Write it down and send it along with the 2 words from video 2 and 4 to oboxplanet@gmail.com along with your mail address, and get your free printed booklet shipped worldwide until the end of 2026. To wrap up the main part of the presentation, let's recap the main points. First, security has 4 main phases. Prevention is already largely private. Compensation damage is also already private. Finding and judging offenders with headhunters and with neutral judges. Second, everyone wants fairness. The victims, the security industry and the accused, not only for moral reasons but also out of financial incentives. Third, the private security contracts will include rights and obligations, liability insurance, compensation rules for damages, legal procedures, penalties, and fines. We talked about why violence is costly on the IOboxPlanet and how the market process and the profit motive lead to peace in all business affairs. why abusive monopolies do not succeed, and we touched on how free societies could live besides conventional states. Summary of the summary. On the IOboxPlanet, the need for security is the same as on Earth, protecting life and property. Because there are no taxes, there is more than enough money for private solutions. And that is why most people have a peace pass, an insurance contract that protects life and property. It is affordable and opens the door for everyday life, for work, rent, banking and more. In return, the peace pass requires respect for other people's life and property, acceptance of fair legal procedures and their outcomes. In other words, a system based on voluntary agreements, responsibility and cooperation can provide security without a state monopoly. But the IOboxPlanet is not paradise. Where humans act, there will always be mistakes and crime. The real question is, could people organize themselves without a state? And I hope you agree, yes, it is possible, and the details are fascinating. And now we move on to the promised bonus chapters.